Hi, good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Shalini Sharma, the founder director of Global Institute for Circular Economy and Sustainable Development Goals. Today, I welcome you all here for the webinar on environment, social and governance impact assessment and reporting. Along with me, today I am having great speakers, Mr. Dinesh Agrawal and Mr. Sudipta Das. We from Global Institute for Circular Economy and Sustainable Development Goals are preparing an awareness booklet on ESG and how it should work into the Indian scenario as well as global scenario. So here with three speakers, we'll be presenting to you the details on ESG. So I will request my colleague, Mr. Vakundas, to kindly introduce the speakers. We will have our first speaker, Mr. Dinesh Agrawal, who will be providing all the details about ESG, the status in India, and how the evolution has happened for this subject in India. Then we have another speaker with us, Mr. Sudipta Das. And then I will be taking an opportunity to share a brief about the booklet that we are going to publish for all the people, on not only the experts, but the general public, the institutes, the organizations who can avail the benefit of this ESG awareness booklet. Over to you, Vakunt.
Thank you, Dr. Shalini. Now, the pandemic has taught us that sustainability is not just about tackling environmental risks, but so much more. It's about creating resilience into development, manufacturing, infrastructure, and this is where the ESG conversation comes into play. Companies need to put sustainability and ESG strategies in place right away, addressing the main challenges of net zero and circularity. And so the experts we have with us today will show us exactly how to do that. Please note, everyone, if you have any questions or comments during the webinar, please do post them in the chat box. Our first speaker for today is Mr. Dinesh Agrawal. Mr. Agrawal is an independent professional and former general manager in the National Thermal Power Corporation, which some of you might know as the NTPC. He has more than 39 years of experience in areas of sustainability, business excellence, corporate social responsibility, resettlement and rehabilitation, and land acquisition, along many others. His areas of expertise include stakeholder engagement, negotiation, and conflict resolution, social and environmental impact assessment, socioeconomic and need assessment surveys, training and capacity building. He has provided leadership for formulating standards on social accountability at work and guidance on good governance for the Bureau of Indian Standards, National Voluntarily Guidelines of Economic, Social, and Environmental Responsibilities of Business, and the National Policy on Rehabilitation and Resettlement for the Government of India. Now, I'd like to request Mr. Agrawal to please share your thoughts. The platform is yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you. When we talk about the ESG, we think it's something new that's going to impact on the corporates. But I will say ESG is not new, and the corporates have been looking at it in a different way over a period of time. Initially from the issue like feel-good factor, to the issue of the compliance, to the issue of the managing the stakeholders, to sharing the information with the stakeholder through the ESG report. And now it's coming into the managing the ESG risk. And that's how the ESG, the corporates are traveling over the journey of ESG. But how did it evolve and what the corporate have been doing from time to time? I mean, if we go back, that how environment was evolved, it started with the UN conference on the human environment way back in 1972, and leading to the Water Act in 77, Air Act in 81, MOEF was formed in 85, and EP Act was framed in 86. But the corporates have been doing it much before that also. In NTPC, we were receiving the environmental clearance for thermal power plant way back in 1977 from the Department of Science and Technology. And we established the environment group way back in 81 and did our EIS study in 82, which was made mandatory only under the EP Act 1986. On the social side also, the corporates have been doing much before what have been made mandatory in 2013 under the Company Act, where the CSR was made mandatory. But in NTPC, like I'm from NTPC, so I can say in NTPC we started doing the social activities for the community development way back in 1980, and had our full-fledged CSR policy in 2003, and allocated a specific budget for that as a percentage of profit. Similarly, even in the governance also, corporate have been doing much before what was made mandatory under the Company Act 2013, and what is expected under the ESG. It started way back in 2000 when the Kumar Mangalam committee was formed by the SEBI, and it suggested the clause 49. And then it evolved in 2002 in Naresh Chandra committee, 2003 in Narayan Murthy committee, 2005, clause 49 was introduced, like that. And as a part of that, the company was expected to make, or it was mandatory to have the audit committee, related party transaction policy, whistleblower policy, risk management policy. All these things evolved. And then the government introduced the Prevention of Corruption Act, which was modified in 2018 from 1888. And the basic difference was the private companies were also involved in that, was covered in that. Till that time, the focus was that only the government people or the government officials were involved, are expected to be involved under the Prevention of Corruption Act. But this new amendment included the people from the private companies also, and as a part of the accomplice in the Corruption Act, and they can be also penalized. So if we look broadly under this issue of the ESG, it was primarily focused on the role and responsibility of the corporate board and focus on the compliance. But this compliance was not adequate because compliance is meant mainly for the government. But then there were customers, there were the civil society organizations, there were the communities who were impacted locally. They were asking that what companies are doing for them. And they were asking, tell us. And it is not just to tell us, show us, involve us. So it was evolving. And as a result of that, companies were forced to prepare the sustainability report. Initially, it started with the environmental report. Most of the companies were preparing I will say, a good brochure, a glossy brochure on the environment report or on the social report. But ultimately, then it evolved into the CSR sustainability report. And for that also, there were framework like the GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, which now evolved into the integrated reporting. So all these were there that, okay, the people doesn't just want a sort of a glossy report or some sort of a feel-good factor. They want a real performance of the company in the area of the environment and social aspect. So the governance was not just limited to the working of the board on the fraud and corruption, but it was also evolved into or focused on the environmental and social issues as well. Then came the issue of the investors, particularly the institutional investors, the domestic institutional investor and foreign institutional. They were more interested in the performance of the company on a long-term basis. So they didn't look only for the economic risk, but they were also looking at the social and environmental risk. And the whole issue of the ESG then transformed from just reporting the performance of what good they are doing or what they are reporting to how they are managing the social and environmental risk. And for that, when they are managing the social and environmental risk, they have to clearly identify what are their goals, what are their targets, and what is the performance of these companies on those goals and targets. So the whole approach is now changing, right from the just doing something compliance to just doing something good, feel good factor, to reporting to the stakeholder, then going into the concept of the risk management on all these aspects and engaging not only for the customers, for the NGOs, for the government, but also the investors. And if you look at it, investors have a lot more say than compared to the government or the customers or the NGO. because the investor have a long-term association with the operating company, whereas the government has more association only with the compliance issue. As long as there is a basic compliance is met, these are not issues. Now, how do they measure it? How do they know companies performing good on the ESG risk and ESG goals and targets? The report itself is not adequate. And that went into the concept of the, I will say, the stock exchanges and developing the indexes. And these indexes are independent. These independent indexes evaluate the company or do the rating of the company where they stand, vis-a-vis their targets and vis-a-vis where they are expected to be there. There is a benchmark for that, for each sector, and how they perform or where they stand with reference to that benchmark. So the whole approach is now shifting from compliance to the performance. And the performance is based on the indicators, and those indicators have a clear targets and goals. Now, what are these indexes? If you look at it, there is a Dow Jones Sustainability Index or a FTSE Index for Good, FTSE for Good Index. Basically, these are all foreign-based indexes, very strict indexes. They cannot be influenced by the company. That they are not influenced by the sort of a good data given by the company. They collect data from many sources, from the media and from the other sources also. And therefore, not many companies can sort of get involved, included in these indexes. As I know, there are only 12 companies which were included in the DJSI, Dow Jones Sustainability Index. Very surprising when we say that as per the NVG or now the NGRBC, 1,000 companies are mandated to prepare the sustainability report or the BRSR report, and they are preparing it. Only 12 companies are qualifying for the DJSI. It is also against about more than 120 companies which are preparing the sustainability report based on GRI. Only 12 companies are able to qualify for getting included in the DJSI. Some few companies are included in the FTSE. And if I look at the public sector, I know only the GAIL, Gas Authority of India Limited, which could get involved or get included in the FTSE for Good. So if we look at it overall, see, the ESG has evolved. The India has also evolved much. From it had a NVG National Voluntary Guideline in 2011, which got evolved into the National Guideline on Responsible Business Conduct in 2018, and for which the SEBI has made it mandatory now for the top 1,000 companies, listed companies, to prepare the sustainability report based on the NGRBC, BRSR. GRI, there is no mandatory requirement. So now only about 1,000 companies will be making the reports based on the BRSR, though they will not be qualifying for the ESG rating. Now, what does this ESG now cover? It is not the conventional way of covering, say, what the company is doing good or what company is complying. They are asking it specific, what is the carbon intensity of the company? What is the carbon footprint of the company? Not for the whole company, but for the product, individual product. And which is the benchmark for it. What is the water intensity of the company? How it is making an impact on the biodiversity, how they are using the green chemistry and avoiding the harmful chemical substances in their production or as a raw material, how they are going into evolving into the zero waste company, the managing the whole waste, how they are addressing the issue of the circularity, how they are measuring the each and every ESG indicator, and not just measuring it, reporting it on their website. So these are not just I will say, dependent on the GRI report or a BRSR report. Many of the companies are making a separate page only for the ESG report, ESG data, not ESG report, I will say. So that the people know exactly what is their performance on these specific ESG indicators. There is a long way to go for the Indian companies, but it is evolving, and they are understanding that if they get a good ESG score, more and more FII, foreign institutional investor, will invest in this company who have a good track record of the ESG and who show that the ESG risks are less. They also get the investment are loan at a much cheaper rate. So it's a win-win situation for the company. They get a good image, they get a good customer support, they get a good ranking, and they get a good funding from the funding agency. So that's how it is evolving. And I hope the company will go a good way in supporting the ESG reports. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sir, I take this opportunity to ask few questions here.
Yeah.
Very, very small questions, but probably good for the people to understand. Can you say a few words on BRSR and the way it is mandated for first top 1,000 companies in India?
Yeah.
So little bit of light if you can put on BRSR.
Good question, and more so because I was involved in the drafting and framing the BRSR, ESG, NVG and NGRBC. We started this work way back in 2008, and we prepared the NVG in 2011. We published it. NGRBC was published in 2018. It covers basically the 9 principles. And 9 principle covers not just the environmental and social aspect, it covers all the aspects of the working of a company. So it includes the fundamentals like the human right, it includes the issue of the governance, it includes the issue of the ethics, it includes the issue of the customer focus, and everything that a company is expected to do to be a good ESG ranking, to get a good ESG ranking. Then what happened that, okay, this is a good sort of a framework, but how the company will implement it. And if they implement, how they show the progress of that. Initially, the reporting on NVG was made mandatory for 500 companies, top 500 companies, listed companies by their ranking, but that report was not found adequate. And therefore, the coverage of the BRSR was much more elaborate, much more wide. It includes what is the basic minimum thing a company is expected to do. And it also included what good thing companies, should see it in future. What they want to do in future. So it included a futuristic approach also. We went to
Mr. Vakul?
Yes.
I think he lost electricity or internet connection.
Yes. So I think we can move on to Mr. Das for now, and we can come back to questions to Mr. Agrawal.
In the meantime, you can call him and then we can continue.
Sure. So
Introduce Mr. Das and then we can
yes.
presentation. I think he needs sharing rights so that we are.
Yes. So our next speaker for today is Mr. Sudipta Das. Mr. Das is currently the leader of sustainability services at Future Station. He was the partner in charge of the climate change and sustainability practice of Ernst & Young in India till November 2017. Mr. Das has set up this practice 20 years ago and has grown it to be the largest practice of this competency in the country. He has also held various global and regional responsibilities with Ernst & Young during his long stint with the firm, and led various public sector as well as private sector client engagements in America, Europe, Africa, Australia, and Asia. He is a thought leader in the domain of climate change and sustainability. Mr. Das has several articles and interviews published in the media, and his views on sustainable development in emerging economies is well received at international forums. He is also a member of several chambers of commerce, where he has been a prolific speaker on topics around sustainability, clean energy, credible reporting, and risk management. Mr. Das, please, the platform is yours.
Thank you so much. I will start with a slide presentation. Let me try and get it. I hope you can see it, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right. So the topic, I think it follows very logically from what Mr. Agrawal has very kindly explained to all of us. the status and emergence of ESG in the country. And also he touched upon aspects around BRSR. So yes, now that we know about ESG, and now that we know about the fact that it is rated or ranked, let us understand how, as a corporate, we can improve our ESG rating. So my presentation has only 3 or 4 slides. So I will try to cover the basic aspects of ESG and ESG rating in course of my deliberation. So what is ESG rating? And I'm afraid there could be some overlap with what Mr. Agrawal mentioned, but for continuity, I think it is important for all of us to come back and see. So companies that manage their environmental, social, and governance aspects better are expected to have sustained long-term growth prospects and better resilience to adversities. The recent pandemic has proved the need for building resilience in business, and clearly what we have seen, and this is all experience that we've seen across the world, that the companies who actually had better practices of ESG suffered less, were proved to be more resilient than the others. When the pandemic happened, and it's still there, I mean, of course, still not over. The investors and customers are the 2 major stakeholders who consider ESG performance as a key criteria in their investment and or purchasing decisions. So it's not only investors, but purchasers also are so important today, and they're so conscious about the ESG performance of the seller from whom they're trying to buy. There are several independent agencies who have the expertise in rating the companies based on their ESG performance. And as Mr. Agrawal also mentioned about DJSI, and he mentioned about FTSE Russell. There are the good part is we now have an Indian agency, which is also a part of S&P Standard & Poor, the same firm which has DJSI, CRISIL. And CRISIL is a very well-known name for ages, since ages in India. CRISIL has started doing the ESG rating for Indian companies. And the basic reason is that not many Indian companies were getting covered by the international rating agencies. Yes, one factor, of course, is the ESG performance may not be as good, but the big factor actually is their turnover. Now, when the turnover of Indian companies get divided by 75 or something like that, to convert that into dollars, US dollars, they really become less. And that's many Indian companies missed the chance of getting rated by the international agencies like DJSI or MSCI or FTSE Russell. So CRISIL in India has started doing the ESG rating, and the first rating of CRISIL actually came out this year in June, 21st of June to be specific. CRISIL came out with a rating of the top 225 Indian companies, and we are given to understand that CRISIL is going to expand their coverage of Indian companies. So next year we expect to see more Indian companies getting covered by CRISIL. The ESG rating agencies, they study data and information from primary as well as secondary credible sources to arrive at the rating. So again, to repeat what Mr. Agrawal said, that one has to ensure not only the primary credible data, but because many agencies, for example, CRISIL doesn't take primary data. CRISIL only depends on secondary data, whereas DJSI depends on both secondary and primary data, credible data, assured data, etc., etc. So one has to be very clear that it is not only performing well, but it is also very important to communicate that well in the proper places which are being tracked by the rating agencies for their rating. The ESG ratings are expected to have an impact on the value of the company as investors and analysts consider these ratings. So it is very, very important to have a good ESG rating, because a poor ESG rating can adversely affect the market cap of a listed company. And that is extremely harmful for the business and the promoters and directors. So clearly, when the ESG rating of CRISIL came out this year, what we have seen in the last 2 or 3 months, a tremendous amount of activity, a tremendous amount of discussion in the Indian boardrooms about ESG. ESG possibly was, in the last 3-4 months, the most commonly heard term in Indian boardrooms of listed companies. And this is all because of the CRISIL rating, which has come out in June. And of course, there are specific funds who invest. And when we talk about funds, I'm sure all of you have also experienced and seen that there are specific, in India, there are specific mutual funds, which are called ESG funds, ESG mutual funds, and who are dealing only with a portfolio of companies with better ESG ratings. Now, we all know about the various aspects, various things that we have discussed, but just to list down, if somebody wants to improve their ESG rating, what are the specific aspects? And I'm not giving a comprehensive list. There could be, some add-ons depending on the rating agency, but this is a very common list, which most of the rating agencies do consider. On environmental aspects, energy, GHG, greenhouse gas, or as someone says, carbon footprint. So it could be corporate, it could be product, it could be life cycle carbon footprint, depending on the usage. And now, just to let you know that in July, in Europe, in the European Union, they have actually come out with their own carbon neutrality policies and targets by 2050. And they have also come out with their targets by 2030. Now, obviously, if somebody is exporting any product to Europe, they have to be very, very clear not only about the life cycle carbon footprint, but specifically the carbon footprint during the usage period when the product is being used in those markets. Water is extremely challenging subject in India because there are certain regions with very high water table. There are certain regions with absolutely very low water table. There are certain regions with rainfall. There are others with no rainfall. There are places where in the country where people can buy water only in tankers, which is so unfortunate. So water is a challenge by itself. Solid waste and circular economy, and obviously now the focus is on the extended producer responsibility, especially with plastic waste, electronic waste. These are very specific wastes which one has to really focus on and consider when talking about management of solid waste and circular economy around that. Product stewardship, how one can actually product stewardship around aspects of ESG. So, the green chemistry goes in there, innovation goes in there, technology goes in there. So how it is actually a product which is, some people call it carbon level also. People are like, for example, today when you buy a bottle of cold drinks, you have printed so many calories on, per 100 ml, so much calories. No, it has already become popular in Europe and the US, where when you buy certain products, they also give you the carbon level. And hopefully, and what we see, it's also coming in India, the carbon level is all a part of carbon stewardship. And of course, climate risk. The climate risk, how not only in direct operations, but on the upstream and downstream, your activities, how you are able to manage the climate risk, because climate risk is real. Climate risk is going to happen. And so for the investors and the customers, the long-term sustainability depends greatly on how you build up your resilience against climate risk, not only in your direct operations, but also your downstream and upstream operations. On the social aspects, clearly people and diversity is getting a very, very important focus. Learning and development, how you're sharing your learning and development across your people. Health and safety was always very important, it's still so. And how you are actually making your supply chain, how you're influencing your supply chain to comply with the ESG aspects. Community engagement, how you're engaging with the community, and it's just not limited to CSR, all across beyond CSR. And of course, in the recent past, how you have actually responded to COVID-19 scenario, not only for your people, but also for your community. Governance, a very, very important aspect is board governance, independence of governors, how independent they are, how much responsibility they get, what kind of committees they're heading, what kind of impact really the independent governors have, how independent directors have, how many meetings the independent directors have among themselves, excluding the company direct, the dependent, directors. So clearly, these are very important. Ethics and compliance, always important. Shareholder relations, especially how the interests of minority shareholders are kept. Disclosure practices, and not only compliance, beyond compliance, and of course, human rights. So these are broadly, I would like to say, the aspects which one has to take care of. And it is not limiting, there could be certain other aspects, but these are actually minimum aspects which one has to take care of. And that's exactly what I mentioned, that there are the rating agencies, the ESG rating agencies not only take care of your performance across these, but also they have their own considerations of weightage, how much weightage they put on environmental, how much on social, how much in governance. For example, CRISIL, let me talk about CRISIL. They put about 35% weightage on environmental performance, 25% on social, and 40% on governance. So governance actually gets much more, between these three. So that's the way to look into it. Not necessarily every rating agencies follow the same principle. And the last slide would be on how to improve the ESG rating. So the process would be, of course, assess the current status of all these aspects, across E, S, and G. Develop continual improvement plans, not just 2-year, 3-year, 5-year, continual long-term improvement goals. Focus specifically on, out of all of these, climate action, resilience, board governance, and community engagement. If I have to pick up 4 most important aspects which get a lot of weightage by the rating agencies, these are the 4. Implement the plans. Okay, so do the plan, implement the plan. And it's so important because people pick up data from secondary sources. Communicate the status periodically. Periodic could be annually, like the ESG report or otherwise. As many rating agencies use the data from secondary sources. So not only ESG reports, it's important to participate wherever possible in CDP, the carbon disclosure. Now it's called CDP, of course, it's no more carbon disclosure project, and TCFD. So these are very, very important databases from which the rating agencies pick up their, their data and information. Use product process stewardship lifecycle studies to an advantage wherever you can. Keep continuing the process. And it is not only so, ESG rating agencies do give credence also to people who take advantage of the opportunities. Let me talk about, let's take 1 more minute, opportunities of, arising out of climate change. You see now today, the entire business of electric vehicle, for example, EVs. EV actually is an opportunity arising out of climate change. People wanted to move out of, conventional, coal or oil-based, power generation, as well as the oil-based, motor vehicles. So the electric vehicles emerged. All right. So this is a great example of an opportunity which definitely a lot of companies, including a lot of Indian companies, are taking advantage of, trying to take advantage of, in the area of, because of this climate change. There are several other opportunities available, and we see a lot of companies taking advantage of this to stay ahead of the curve. So with this, I think I will stop here with my small presentation on how to improve ESG rating. This, of course, is just the the basic and the brief, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Das.
An experience, and very clearly that could be one of the aspects that one can look forward to coming in aspect under in the area of ESG reporting in India too. And yeah, I mean, see, if you look at the entire reporting process, though one can say it has started long back, I guess the first Indian company, the first 2 Indian companies in the private sector at least, who started the GRI reporting, to the best of my knowledge, I may be wrong, are Tata Steel and ITC. They also started the same time, same year. And incidentally, in some way or the other, I was involved with both these companies and their reporting process. So though one can say that reporting in India has started long back, but frankly, today only about 120 odd companies out of so many listed companies. I think we have got about 8,000 listed companies, if I'm not mistaken, so many listed companies in India. So out of them, about only 120 are reporting, regularly in GRI, and those also, many of them are not reporting regularly. Some have done for a year and then, discontinued, all kinds of experiences there. So my view is, let us first get a proper conventional reporting system established. What we're talking about, digitization, is a step forward, but possibly it will take some time, because in India, unfortunately, very few companies are actually following the reporting process as compared to the number of companies that we have. Yeah, I mean, it's something to look forward to, but when it's going to happen in the country, I cannot comment. It's quite an ambitious, way to look into that. And the other thing, you talked about the subjectivity. Yes, subjectivity is going to be there, and that is why the training, or the uniformity of training of the assessors of all these rating companies is so important. And I know they have got an internal training system which tries to bring in uniformity in rating, despite the that yes, there's a lot of subjectivity in this, in the domain, in the entire aspects. Why only governance in the entire ESG domain? Because you see, you cannot compare the environmental performance of say a steel making company with an IT company. I mean, there are sectoral things, where clearly a lot of subjectivity has to come in. You cannot just compare apple to apple. So I mean, that's what I think subjectivity will remain for quite some time. Yeah.
So I just I'll request the participants, if you have any questions, kindly post on the chat box. We would be happy to take it up. And lastly, I think I would just share a few of the things that as a founder of Global Institute for Circular Economy and SDGs, we have worked quite a lot on the digitization aspect. And I'm happy to share that I was working with the Confederation of Indian Industry before establishing my own organizations, and where we were working on carbon dioxide and equivalent gases emissions from the automobile sector. We were working on the building sector, and we developed certain tools that can help the companies to assess the GHG emissions into their life cycle phase, for their whole life cycle, right from mining to production to coming out the product and taking its place into the showroom, and then taking it to the use. So that kind of intense tools we have worked on. And as I was leading India Greenhouse Gas Program for around 4 years, that was a tri-partner program between CII, WRI, and TERI. So we tried to really reduce the subjectivity in terms of environment and social aspects as such. Governance is still like that need to be reported time to time, that need to be taken up as such. Like many times the regulations change, some new policies come up that need to be followed up, and that happens. So I'll pause here, and currently I am unable to see any questions from any of the participants. Over to you, Batman.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to, on behalf of the Global Institute for Circular Economy and Sustainable Development Goals, thank our expert speakers, Mr. Agrawal and Mr. Das, for your extremely valuable time and the highly thought-provoking sessions that you have given to us and our participants. And of course, I'd also like to thank the participants for joining us. And I hope that this session gave you something to think about that will help you implement ESG in your own organizations, or really gain a deeper understanding of the concept and how it is beneficial to not just our country, but the world overall, and how it helps tackle all the issues that we're facing these days. So thank you once again for being a part of this web event.
I thank all the speakers and participants here. For now, we close this webinar. Have a very good evening. Thank you all.